But our top story this hour, as European leaders are in Washington to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of his high-stakes talks with US President Donald Trump. According to the European Commission, a preparatory meeting with Zelensky will take place before larger multilateral sessions at the White House. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen, NATO Secretary General and several heads of state and government are expected to join. On his way to Washington, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Europe's united front was essential to ensuring that Ukraine is not pressured into an unfavourable deal, stressing that any settlement must safeguard Kyiv's sovereignty and security. Here is what was said.
This war in Ukraine has been going on a really long time now, 3+ years. Hugely impacted the Ukrainians, who've suffered hugely. But it's also impacted Europe, it's impacted every single family and community in the United Kingdom. And so everybody wants it to end, not least the Ukrainians. But we've got to get this right. We've got to make sure there is peace, that it is lasting peace, and that it is fair and that it is just. And that's why I'm travelling to Washington with other European leaders to discuss this face-to-face with President Trump and President Zelenskyy, because it's in everyone's interests, it's in the UK's interests that we get this right.
Well, this visit is widely seen as a show of solidarity with Zelensky amid fears that Trump may push him towards a pro-Moscow settlement. Some observers have even described the European delegation as Zelenskyy's bodyguards, recalling his difficult Oval Office encounter with Trump earlier this year. Well, joining us to discuss the significance of this meeting set to take place in just a few hours is Professor John Curtin from the University of Toronto. Professor Curtin, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. We've, of course, had talks following that summit in Alaska with the Coalition of the Willing, with European leaders, and these are now set to extend into the US with Donald Trump, US Vice President J.D. Vance, and, of course, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What does Europe want out of these talks?
Well, I think the key thing we need to have this White House meeting be a success is an agreement by everyone, including President Trump, that we will demand a ceasefire now. President Trump was right when he said that it was his #1 goal just before the Alaska summit. And I think many people were stunned, not only that he didn't get it, but then it evaporated. And he said, well, my top goal is now Vladimir Putin's. I need an overall peace settlement before we can stop the fighting. So we've got to turn that around and then back some of the key demands: no territorial concessions by Ukraine, and nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
Yes, Professor Curtin, of course, that was a big point that was raised throughout our live coverage of that Alaska summit. Of course, Ukraine not present, but this news is a source of optimism for many allies of Ukraine. How do you think Volodymyr Zelensky will be preparing for these talks with the Trump administration? Of course, the last time he was in this position, there was a frosty encounter that led to, of course, huge ramifications on the Ukrainian battlefields.
All of the leaders who will be at the White House meeting have, in the lead up to it, been saying nice things about President Trump, flattering him, which is a useful way to start. I think what they'll need to do is say, yes, thank you for your proposals, Mr. President. Some of your ideas could help pave the way, but they do have to make it clear to Donald Trump that they all remain firm, all the G7 leaders there, and Zelensky, on their core bottom line. And even ask Donald Trump, you said if you didn't get an immediate ceasefire, there would be, quote, serious consequences. We haven't seen them yet. What are they, and when will they come?
Yes, Professor Curtin, I'm glad you brought that up because, of course, Trump's rhetoric was a more forceful one towards Vladimir Putin. First, imposing a 50-day deadline, then a 10 to 12-day deadline, then setting a specific date. Those dates have all passed without any concrete US sanctions on Russia. The only country so far to be hit with sanctions in relation to the Russia-Ukraine conflict from the US in recent days and weeks is India. How do you think that those sanctions could play out? And do you think Trump will use his authority as the US president to put pressure on Russia through sanctions if a ceasefire deal isn't agreed shortly?
Well, I certainly think he was right to impose those oil sanctions on India to stop India buying Russian oil and basically financing Putin's war machine. But the even more important decision was Trump's decision not to do the same thing with the People's Republic of China and the no limits friendship between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin seems to be intact and could become even tighter. What we do need is to see stronger sanctions right now. And here, the ball is in the European, Canadian, and Japanese court. None of those countries need a permission slip from Donald Trump before they can impose more unilateral sanctions of their own. Canada's just in it within the past week or two. Europe has been moving towards it, so we'll need to see a lot more soon.
Yes, Professor Curtin, a lot has been spoken about security guarantees, but Trump in the same breath has spoken about no NATO membership for Ukraine. So how will these security guarantees manifest themselves?
There's only one that will really work. That will be credible, and that's to allow Ukraine to join NATO as soon as it wants and the NATO allies agree. We've had so many security guarantees going back to the infamous 1994 Belgrade Memorandum, Ukrainian, Russian, legally guaranteed in Russia on the Ukrainian-Russia border. They're all worthless. And even NATO's Article 5 doesn't commit the NATO members to actually send troops. An attack on one is an attack against all. It merely gives them legal permission to. Then they'll have to decide. Only once has it been tested, and they made the right decision. That was rushing to the defense of the United States of America on 9/11. So it can happen. It is credible, and that's what we need. Donald Trump just, within the past 24 hours or so, said part of his position now is no NATO with Ukraine in. We've got to turn that one around right away.
Yes, Professor Curtin, of course, a red line of Russia's is Ukraine joining NATO. There are other red lines, including Ukrainian red lines that include conceding land. Trump has said that Crimea may need to be permanently handed over to Russia, but also talk of the Donetsk region, the Donbass, other areas, around 20% of Ukraine that Russia currently holds. Do you think Zelenskyy will be forced into a corner to concede some land in order to get this deal over the line? Or can Ukraine and European allies stay strong in their calls